Today, we are taking a journey to a hidden gem but a truly enchanting destination, the Nemours Estate. Nestled in the heart of Delaware, Nemours Estate is a French-inspired masterpiece filled with opulent details and a rich history tied to the DuPont family legacy. Known for its architectural grandeur and sprawling gardens, the estate is no stranger to acclaim. Featured in publications like Victoria Magazine and Architectural Digest, Nemours captivates visitors with its beauty year-round, but becomes especially magical during the holiday season. Joining me for this special conversation is Paula Phipps, the Manager of Collections and Interpretation at Nemours. Paula brings us behind the scenes of the extraordinary estate, offering insights and stories into the architecture and design, but also how the team transforms the estate into a holiday wonderland. Whether you are passionate about historic homes, inspired by festive design, or simply looking to immerse yourself in the magic of the season, this episode is sure to delight. Let's explore the beauty and traditions of Nemours Estate. Welcome to Grandma's Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host and the founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma's silver. All right, well, Paula, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. We are, hard to believe, already in December and doing all of the fun, festive holiday things. So I'd like to just first give you a chance to introduce yourself, your role at the Nemours Estate, and then, if you don't mind, for folks who may be a bit unfamiliar with the estate, give them just a little bit of background on why it's significant and how your role kind of intersects with what's going on there.
My name is Paula Phipps. I'm the Manager of Collections and Interpretation at Nemours Estate in Wilmington, Delaware. That means I'm in charge of all the stuff and what we say about the stuff. So that includes, the furnishings, the paintings, every little object, everything that you would find in a home that you find in this home. This house was actually built in 1910 by Alfred I. DuPont, and it was built for his second wife, Alicia. And surprisingly, this 47,000 square foot house only took about 18 months to build. And they moved in just before Christmas time in 1910. So it's significant because it is one of the DuPont estates. The Delaware Valley is known for the DuPont family and the DuPont company, which a lot of people are familiar with the DuPont company in terms of chemicals and that sort of thing. But it originated as a producer of gunpowder, black powder. So that's where it all began here in Delaware. And the other thing that's significant and really unusual is we are also part of a children's hospital. Mr. DuPont died in 1935, and he left in his will a stipulation that money should be spent to build a hospital for quote unquote crippled children. His widow, Jessie, his third wife, made that her life mission after he died. And within 5 years of his death, the hospital opened right on the property. So it wasn't across town or anything like that. It was actually on the property. And so today we are now a world-renowned hospital that covers everything other than orthopedics. We're on the same campus, but there is a gate that separates us in a little bit of a row, but we are open for visitors, for guests at the hospital, patients and the family members and the staff at the hospital to walk across the street and come visit, come and take a break and enjoy our beautiful formal gardens and our mansion, which both are all decorated for the holidays right now.
You were mentioning the hospital. I knew that there was an affiliation. I did not realize that they were so physically close to one another. But like you just mentioned, to be able to provide a bit of respite for folks who are in the hospital, whether that be staff, visiting family, but it was also really impactful as someone standing on the outside because you can see it from different points of the property. That was also really impactful. So I think I'd love to talk a little bit more about that later, just because
Sure.
understanding perhaps why there was a drive for him to do that. If we could go back for a moment to the estate itself, he built this, first of all, how many rooms is it in 18 months? I mean, to have seen this myself, this is a massive, massive property. The estate is huge, 18 months. I mean, you can't even build.
Well, yeah, we say 18 months and we promote it as 77 rooms. Depending on who you're talking to, you know, a closet might be counted as a room. A bathroom might be counted as a room. If you come to visit the mansion, it's usually about half. I think it's maybe 34, 35 rooms that you can actually visit when you are here. We have 3 floors that are open to the public. So there's plenty to see.
I was just kind of baffled that in such a short window, he was able to have this house
Right.
built.
And it was move-in ready. I mean, it was move-in ready in the fact that they could live here. It was not fully decorated. I mean, that's
Right.
something that took time, just like you and I, you know, we move into our new home and it takes a while to get everything settled. And the gardens weren't all completed at that time either. The gardens continued to be expanded upon and developed over the next 20, 30 years. So that part was also still a work in progress, but the house was completed and they could live in it within 18 months. And it's interesting, we have, you know, some old photos, which is unusual that we have old photos of some of the interior spaces. And you can see they're pretty sparse around 1913. And they've been here for 3 years. There's some chair here, there might be a rug there, but you know, it took them a little bit of time to get settled. And I really think it was probably during the era of the third wife, Jessie Ball DuPont, is when the house really became settled in and was really fully furnished and decorated during her era.
Now, I have questions about this
Okay.
because we all know that every individual puts their own stamp on design and style, and understanding there was sort of this history of different history of ownership, if you will. Did it always, because having been there, I know there's quite a bit of French influence. So was that his? Was that his first wife's? What was that? What
Right.
was the
So
draw to do any of that?
Right. So just to be clear, this house was not built for his first wife. It was built for his second wife,
Wife. Okay.
Alicia. And Alicia was very much a Francophile. She loved everything French. Mr. Dupont, of course, had French ancestry, so he was very proud of his French heritage. So it was the two of them that really had this strong French influence in the interior, the very formal French gardens outside. So it was really Alicia was really kind of driving that, but he supported that 100%. Again, he was very proud of his French heritage. Jessie, when she came into the picture in 1920, she was very much an Anglophile. She loved everything English. So she was a big fan of the British royal family. So you start seeing a few more English things in the house, but she did not come in and wipe out everything else from Alicia's era. She was buying some French things as well. But we have a little bit more English influence when Jessie moved into the house.
There's so much here, so bear with me because I'm bouncing all over the place already. But as someone who works with quite a bit of the material culture on site, were they decorating or were they collecting?
They were decorating. They were
Okay.
decorating. And so that's one of the big challenges that we have. The house is when if you were to come to visit, pretty much everything you see is original. Now, when I say original, it could be original to 1910, it could be original to 1930, it could be original to 1960. When they were purchasing items, they were buying to decorate their home. They were buying what they liked. They weren't thinking, oh, someday this house is going to be a museum and I have to buy the best of the best. That's not the way they were thinking. Both during Alicia's era and Jessie's era, they were buying really nice things. But in terms of the art collection specifically, it's very eclectic. We have some really good paintings from old masters. We have some outright forgeries. We have some commissioned reproductions. We have some just strange pieces that you look at and you think there's got to be a story here or a side joke or something. So, but that's what makes it fun because they were buying what they liked. And unfortunately, because they weren't thinking of this is going to be a museum one day, we don't have a lot of documentation. They didn't necessarily save all of their receipts. We don't necessarily have a letter that states, I'm going to buy this painting because. In some cases we do, but we don't have a lot of information. Now, if you were a collector, you would be documenting things more carefully. You would really be paying close attention of where you purchased it, when you purchased it, and that sort of thing. We don't really have a lot of that. So there's a lot of mystery and detective work in my job and trying to find, where these things came from and when they were purchased and why they were purchased and that sort of thing. But I will say that Jessie in the 40s and 50s, I think she did start to turn that corner a little bit, because at that point, she did know that the house would be left to be open to the public when she died, which would be in 1970s when Mrs. DuPont died. Again, in Alfred's will, he had stipulated that the property would be open for the pleasure of the public. So at that point, she did know that it would be a museum of some sort. So she, in the 40s and 50s, she started collecting artwork much more aggressively, trying to become a little bit more educated in terms of art. She was reaching out to, various directors at different museums, trying to get their input, their thoughts in terms of making purchases, as opposed to just, I like it.
Interesting. Just to provide, I suppose, a bit more context on the museum. So was it when he passed, there was the stipulation that she could essentially remain there
Yes.
the duration of her life?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so he died in 1935 and she died in 1970. So she was here for another 35 years.
Could we go back to talking about the hospital for a moment? So what
Sure.
was the driving factor behind him wanting the hospital?
Yeah, we don't really know. That is one of the big mysteries. We can speculate. There are a couple little things. It's like, well, maybe. But again, we do not have a letter that says, I'm going to build a children's hospital because, or if there is a letter, we haven't found it yet. One thing we can say is his second wife, Alicia, for whom this house was built, had a lot of difficulty and heartbreak in terms of having children. They did have 4 children together, but they all died within a couple of days of being born. I believe it had to do with the RH factor with Alicia. So there was a lot of heartbreak there. We know that they had contributed to a maternity hospital in Maryland. If something else happened later on that was sort of groundbreaking, we're not really aware of it. So there's no smoking gun really that says this is why we want to do it. So it is one of those mysteries, very specific. And he had 4 biological children from his first wife. None of them had any physical disabilities. Alicia did have a child of her own from her first husband. No issues there. So we really don't know. It is one of those mysteries. And, we're always hoping that we open that one book or that one letter and we have these eureka moments. So
Yeah.
it happens sometimes and maybe it will. And it just may be that mystery. We never know. But we're very, very grateful for him to be thinking. He was very civically minded. He was very interested in helping people here. So, he also helped senior citizens establish basically a pension plan for seniors in the state of Delaware. So maybe this was another end of the spectrum. I don't know. That's complete speculation. But again, the fact that it was so specific, don't really know.
Wow. Well, that is interesting because it is so specific. And I just always thought that there must be an obvious personal tie.
Yeah, and there might be that we just haven't discovered. So
Interesting.
one day. Yeah.
Wow. Well, either way, it's obviously, especially for those in the area, we all know how wonderful Nemours is. We're all grateful for it, regardless of answers or no answers. I do want to go back to some of the house and its history for a moment, other than the fact that it is an incredible property. From your perspective, as someone who has a bit more interaction with the history, a bit more understanding of the history, what makes it special?
My first response to that is a response that a lot of our visitors give us when they come in the door. First of all, it is beautiful and it can be quite overwhelming. And you walk in the door and you have that experience. But the other thing that people always say, which I'm very proud of because it's something I really aim for since I came here, is for people to feel like it's a home, because this was first and foremost a home. And we want people to be able to walk through it and feel comfortable, but there's a coziness about it. It doesn't feel cold and sterile. And the comments from people are always that it feels like a home. I can see it. And there are some very big rooms, but none of the rooms are so overwhelmingly large that it doesn't feel palatial. It still feels like a home, a cozy home that happens to have a big dining room. So, but
Yeah.
most of the rooms are very, livable, size wise, are not shocking. So I think that's the thing that stands out for me and for visitors when they come here. And we do let them walk around at their own leisure. We don't have strict guided tours that we take you from room to room and you can only see this and you can only see that and you have to go a certain way. It's open. So you can go any direction you want to go. If you want to go straight to the dining room and if you want to stand in there for 3 hours, you can stand in there for 3 hours. So we kind of let you do what you want to do in the house within limits, of course. So I think that's another thing is that we're not really structured, which is, I think, very different from the way it was when we first opened in 1977 as a house museum. And then it feels a little bit more relaxed. The other thing that we are a little bit different, there are a lot of other properties around here that have incredible gardens. There's no question about that. Ours is very formal. It is referred to as a formal French garden. And my understanding is that we are the largest formal French garden in North America.
Wow.
And what that really means is there's sort of the main building, which would be the mansion, is the center, and everything sort of goes from there. Closer into the mansion or the main building that you are, it's going to be much more structured. There'll be more like rooms. The gardens will be room-like. As you go out further and further, it becomes a little less formal. So on one side of the house, we have what we call the Southern Gardens, or sometimes called the English Garden. The gardens there are a little bit more relaxed, and you don't have these structured beds that are creating patterns that you do in the formal areas. They're, like I said, they are rooms and patterns. If you keep going, you end up in the woods. So it just becomes less and less formal and more relaxed the further out you go. But it's the center is sort of the apex.
And it is beautiful. The gardens, especially, I saw it in the summertime. I have to imagine every season has its special areas or focal points.
Right. Probably winter is not the best because, we don't have flowers out and the trees have gone to rest.
Right.
But we have decorated for the holidays, so that helps a little bit. But the spring, summer, and fall really are beautiful. And in fact, we used to open on May 1st, and we were realizing that there's so many beautiful flowers in April. We decided, why not open a month earlier and let visitors come in and see all the daffodils and the other flowers that are coming out in the springs. It is spectacular, and it's spectacular all year long.
I was walking around and I was definitely moseying because it was just so much to take in,
Yeah.
especially because I love design. I love history. I mean, there was something to look at in every little crevice and corner.
Mm-hmm.
I was also paying close attention to the views out the windows.
Yes.
And that was obviously very carefully planned.
Right.
But it was really interesting because it also changes your experience in the rooms. It was just really interesting, that interaction of the extension of space,
Mm-hmm.
which was really neat. And you were definitely right. Again, going back to moseying, it had that feeling of if you were visiting someone and they happened to have a 77-room estate, it was almost like felt like I was walking around with a cup of coffee because they said they had to step out and I just wanted to just
Mm-hmm.
wander around and see how it looked.
That's
It did
great. I'm
have
glad
that
you felt that
feel.
way.
Yeah, yeah, it has that feel, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do want to hear a little bit more about your role as it pertains to the house, the museum. I mean, what does your research involve?
So that's a great question. And I will say that I have not had a lot of opportunity to do that because I've been in this particular role for about 3 years now. And when I came into the role, my first major task was to move all the collections that were stored away in every closet, every nook, every cranny, every attic space, every basement space, to move all these objects out of the mansion into a new collections facility.
Okay.
So that is a huge task, as you can imagine. So I've been very much focused on moving the things. Sometimes I do research something, I'll come across something, and these are things that might have been boxed up for 30, 40, 50, maybe even 100 years. I opened up a crate the other day that I found pieces of newspaper at the bottom of the crate from 1912, which
Wow.
tells me these pieces, they were cornices that were originally in the music room, the original cornice pieces that were in there. So they've been sitting there for 100 years. They've probably been looked at some point, but it's exciting that you open up something. It's like, when was the last time anybody saw this, or has anybody ever seen this in the last century? So it's very exciting. And so there are sometimes I will send myself down rabbit holes trying to figure out where it came from or what it is. And there are a lot of times I will open a box and I'll pull out an object and I literally have no idea what it is. Don't have a clue. Sometimes that just gets set on a different shelf until I can come back to it. Or sometimes this random thing might have a name on it or a tag or a label or something. And I can just, to be able to identify it, I'll start doing a little bit of research so I can say, oh, that's what this is. Okay. So as I go along, sometimes I do, but my thing I'm really looking forward to is once I've completed moving everything that needs to be moved, then I can really start sitting down and researching the objects, getting more information, maybe get a little more provenance, finding out their history. You know, when was this chair purchased?
Well, that's exciting. And
It
you
is
have to set
exciting.
yourself up. I mean, that's just part of the process.
It is.
Is having access to it all, really.
Yeah.
Speaking of access, again, for those who have seen the estate, it is beautifully decorated. How much of that is in its original locations? How much of that is folks from the museum
Right.
going in and rearranging or changing or choosing which items are out when?
So there's a couple different things. So first I will start off that we don't have rotating galleries, so we're not changing things out. The only thing that really gets changed on an irregular basis is the dining room table. I do set that for each season. I might move something around from time to time just because it's, you know, this chair is in the way for the public and things like that. We are talking about perhaps rotating some of the artwork a little bit. So we can do that. There's nothing set in stone that says everything is where it has to be because it's always been there. Looking at the rooms the way they are today, they're pretty close to what they were in the 20s. And we know that again because we have some interior photography that the DuPonts had done, and I'm not quite sure why, but it's a great resource because you can look at this photo that was taken in, 1923 or 27, whatever it was, and you can say, oh my gosh, that painting was originally here and not in the room where we have it now, or that's the exact same chair, or, oh, I have the wrong chair in there. I've only been here for 8 years. I've been in this position for 3 years, but I've been here for 8 years. And the rooms haven't changed around too much. I did change the library around when I first took on this role because it felt very awkward the way it was set up. And it felt like a stage set. It didn't feel like a comfortable room at all the way it would have been done. After I had rearranged the furniture, I happened to come across one of these old photos and it was the way I set it up. So it's like,
Oh my gosh, right on
that's the way it's
track.
supposed to be. I'm guessing that probably a lot of the things were pretty much the same as they were from 1970 when Mrs. DuPont died. Some things were changed during that 7-year period, but I think it's pretty close. There is one room that we call the gold room. We also sort of promote it as the best guest room in the house because it has the incredible view of the long walk right out the middle of the window, out the middle of the house. I understand that a former director here did change some of the furniture setting around there. So there's nothing that says we can't. There's probably a lot of changing when Mrs. DuPont was here too, because again, needs changed. As she got older and children grew up and there were grandchildren visiting and that sort of thing. So I'm sure we're shifting things around, and, this room doesn't need a double bed. It really needs 2 twin beds. So we'll move some things around. So I think there was some changing around, just like, in our own homes. If we're there for long periods of time, we're going to redecorate a little bit. We're going to buy a new chair. We're going to move this chair into that room. So I don't really want to mess around too much because I like the way it looks now. And again, there's some tweaking. The one thing that I have changed, I changed the library and also the conservatory, which is my personal favorite room in the house.
I was just about to ask you.
Yeah, so the
Favorite.
conservatory, which is the room that really blends the indoors and the outdoors, and it's meant to, open up all the doors and you've got nature coming in. But when I came on here, it had a lot of bamboo furniture and some clunky things in there, which, that's what Mrs. DuPont had in there in the later years. That's the one room that I've tried to pull back a little bit and save more for Alicia. Again, this house was built for the second wife, Alicia, and she was only here for 10 years and she died suddenly in 1920. So the house really was more of Jessie's because she lived here longer than anybody else. She lived here for almost 50 years. Even though a lot of the things in the house today were purchased by Alicia and Alfred, it feels more like Jessie's house. And so I sort of wanted to reserve one room that was more thinking more about Alicia. And that room was the easiest one to do because there was not a lot of furniture in it. I just switched out the bamboo and brought in back some of the wicker pieces that were in there originally when Alicia lived here. So I did change those two out just to give it a little feel, but I don't foresee any other rooms being changed anytime soon. I don't see a need for it. And furniture is not really easy to move in and out. So if I don't have to, I don't think it's necessary.
I don't blame you. Well, especially after 3 years of moving things. I don't blame you. Understanding again that you have a very close personal relationship with most of the objects in the home. How do the holiday decorations play into that? Are those items that were also part of, I use the term collection loosely, but are they items that were already in the home that you're bringing out and have historical backgrounds of their own, historic pieces, antiques, vintage? Is it a blend of things? What does this look like?
It's a blend of things, but it is mostly things that have been purchased over the years. We take a lot of liberties in decorating the mansion. It is beautiful. It's not, I don't think, over the top, but the DuPonts would not have had a Christmas tree in every room. And we don't have a tree in every single room, but we have trees in a lot of rooms. So the DuPonts would not have done that. They probably would have decorated, different rooms in different ways, but not to the degree we do. We don't have a lot of Christmas decor that belong to them. There is the Christmas tree in the library that has the DuPont ornaments, their Christmas tree ornaments. Another little piece in the writing room, it's a Santa sleigh. Everything else is things that's sort of been acquired over the years from the staff because all the decorating is done by the staff. Try to keep it looking as authentic as we can. I keep reminding everybody, I said, we're not doing a showstopper house. This is not a showcase. This is just, we're going to decorate this room and make it look beautiful. Think of how you would decorate your home, maybe. That's what I'm really aiming for, and not these over the top scenes. It's just not what we're going for. We want to keep it, a little simpler.
It's in line with what you just, mentioned earlier with wanting it to feel like a real home and comfortable and
Right.
cozy.
Right. And, I pull out different things. For the people who are decorating the rooms, they're allowed to ask for what I call the little wish list. So they might say, oh, it would be really great if we could bring out that antique doll so I can put it in this room. And so I'll bring out the antique doll and put it in that room. Or, can we bring out that special tea set that is never out? It's like, yeah, we can bring out the special tea set. So I move things around, not a lot, because I don't want to move things just for the sake of moving things. There needs to be a reason. But I definitely bring things out that maybe aren't seen all the time. During the holiday decorating era, there is a little bit more movement of items.
Are you using the items to tell any stories at any point?
The way that rooms are decorated, there's one room, the north front room, which we traditionally sort of decorated as a children's room. So we might talk about, the children that might have stayed there, or the fact that when Mrs. DuPont, her sisters would come with their children, and so there'd be more children in the house. So in that respect, I get to do the dining room. The dining room's mine.
That's your baby.
But I have help. I do have help. But this year it sort of has a kind of a peacock theme. And that was partially inspired by a bouquet of peacock feathers that we have that belong to the last peacock that lived here on the estate. So we can talk a little bit about, his name was Blue. We can talk about that. Last year, the dining room table the whole decor was based on a set of beautiful dishes that I found stashed away in the attic that who knows how long had been hidden away. I'd never seen them. They'd never been documented. So we can talk a little bit about that. So not a lot of story driven, but if there's a little something, we'll make a point of talking about it.
So much of a museum is about the interpretation and the storytelling. But what's really interesting about the estate is that it was a home for so long.
Mm-hmm.
In many ways, it's the interpretation is just that you're welcoming folks into to appreciate it.
Right. Yeah, there's a story I've heard that when we were, I don't know if it was right after we had opened as a museum, and again, we opened in 1977, and it was a very different, it was structured very differently at that point. You had to call, you had to make a reservation, you had to get on a bus, you were brought over here, you were given a very strict tour of the mansion, then you were put back on the bus, and then you were sent your way. So it was a very different experience back then. But I heard a story. There were two little girls who grew up here. It was little Alicia, who was Alicia DuPont's biological daughter from her first marriage. And then there was a little girl named Denise. She was a French war orphan from World War I that was adopted and brought here in 1916. Right before we opened, or right after we opened, I'm not quite sure. And Denise came back. She wasn't quite an older woman at that point in time. And she was walking through the mansion. And I think she and the director or the curator or somebody at the time said to her, it's like, I can't imagine living in a place like this. And Denise's response was, well, I can't imagine not living in a place like this, because this was her home. It was always her home. So that's how it was to her. One of the things that I've focused on when I first came here is changing the interpretation, because it had been so structured. The tour that you were given is what I call a this is this and that is that kind of tour, where you just point out every little thing. And that's all great and fine for some places. I wanted to get away from that kind of tour. I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to bring the DuPonts a little bit more to life, show that they were humans. Were they saints? No, they were people. There's some nice stories and there's some so nice stories, but they were human beings. And I think for most people, and there are some who want to know about every painting in every chair, then there are definitely those people. For the general person who walks through the door, they don't care about that particular painting. They really want to know more about, well, who lived here, and why did they live here, and why does this room look like this, and what's the story, and what was her life like, and that sort of thing. So I think that I've been working really hard to get towards that, and I think we're doing pretty well there. A couple years ago, I tried to expand that a little bit from not just the DuPonts, but to the staff that was here too. Because, there are really officially only 4 people who lived in this house. There were a lot of guests that would come, but there were only 4. It was Mr. and Mrs. DuPont and the 2 little girls. But there was a whole slew of staff that lived here as well, and they're the ones that ran the house. When we started emptying out rooms that had been used for storage, we could start using them for their original purpose, like the servants' dining room and the servants' sitting room. So we can show those and tell a little bit more about their stories, as well as who the people were here, because I think that a lot more people can relate to the domestic servants than they can to a DuPont. People love the kitchen because everybody can relate to a kitchen. You can't always relate to a drawing room or a conservatory, but everybody's got a kitchen of some sort. So I'm trying to bring back the things that people can relate to and really understand, which also often will open up them talking about their experiences. Oh, I remember as a kid, we had a kitchen like this, or, we had that appliance, or these kinds of things. So it gets a conversation often going with our guests as well. So it makes it kind of fun. And again, just bringing the humanity in the house, whether it was the DuPonts or the servants.
And I didn't really think about it at the time that I was walking through, because I think I was there. It was sensory overload in the best possible way.
You're going to have to come back.
Oh, I definitely. But I went with my parents and my husband. Of course, being in this area in particular, we know all about the DuPont family. That's a very familiar name. But I really didn't know anything about them in particular. That was very much a learning experience on site. So I was absolutely getting as close as I possibly could to some of the fabrics and looking at, little bits and pieces of the furniture and that sort of thing. But I was also so engaged in just figuring out how these people lived. I think you all did a beautiful job of really outlining, because there were a lot of unfamiliar nooks and crannies and, like you said, appliances. And it was really interesting because my family, the joke in our family is that I am the person who takes a million years to walk through a museum because I love to read every little placard. And my family is not into that. They like to go in, take a look, keep walking, but they were reading every single little tidbit, and because it was done in such an approachable way.
We don't have a lot of signage for a couple of reasons. First of all, again, we're not technically a museum, we're a home. We want it to look like a home, not like a gallery. A lot of people are like your family, I don't want to stand there and read a really long label or a
Mm-hmm.
huge wall sign. And I'm guilty of that too. I am probably go faster through museums than I should, and I've worked in museums my whole life. But I'm kind of somewhere between you and your family. I know I read a lot of things, but I don't get down to the weeds and read every tiny thing. But I want to keep that in mind that, probably more people just want to read something short and simple, get the basics, and then move on. And the fact that the house is self-guided, I want you to be able to walk into a room and to know what it is and get a little bit of information without having somebody there. We do have interpreters, also known as tour guides. Interpreter is fancy word for tour guide, stationed in most rooms in the house, not every room. So if you have more questions, you can ask them. But we want to make it accessible, and you can learn something, whether it's just reading the signs or asking another question. And then we also have the fun facts around the house. I don't know if you noticed those. So
Yes, they were great.
yeah, they're just exactly, they're fun facts. And sometimes they're relative to the room you're in, and sometimes it's relative to a person or season, whatever it is. They're just fun facts that are connected in some way, shape, or form.
That also gets me thinking, do we have a sense of how, because with it being such a large home, with it being such, there's just so much, one of the things we were actually saying there was, oh my gosh, this is an entertaining house.
Mhm.
So do you have a sense of how much of that was taking place there? Were they having people over frequently?
Yeah, well, in the
Holidays?
early years, I would say no. I don't think that Alfred and Alicia entertained very much. I don't have hardcore evidence either way, but we just don't hear about it. And I think there's a couple reasons why. First of all, they were both sort of estranged from the DuPont family. They were both divorced, and which was scandalous at that time. They were divorced, I think it was in 1906, 1907, and they both married immediately. There's all sorts of speculation and rumors about the two of them. Nobody's really ever going to know the true, relationship between the two of them except for them. But they were both divorced. Mr. DuPont was estranged from the DuPont company by about 1913, 14. He basically was kicked out of the company. So they really didn't want to have anything to do with any of the DuPonts. So I think that's one of the reasons why he built this estate for her as sort of an enclave, an escape from everybody else. Mr. DuPont was deaf. He was not born deaf. It's something that increased over time, and it had been an issue with his first wife. I think that made it more challenging for them to entertain and have people around. Alicia spent a lot of time in Paris. She was a Francophile. She, was fluent in French. She did a lot of translations. She was very literary. So she was away a lot. I never have gotten the sense that they entertained very much here at all. Jesse, however, yes, I think they did entertain quite a bit more. They married in 1921. And she had very close family. She had two sisters and two brothers. They were here frequently, and then their children would come, and then their grandchildren. So I would say, we never had these great Gatsby-like parties, and nobody was swinging off of chandeliers or anything like that. Dinner parties were usually kept pretty small, usually, 8 to 10. I think the dining room table is always set for 8. Relatively small parties, always close friends and families. Although in 1931, Mrs. DuPont's sister Elsie did get married here, and they had their breakfast reception in the dining room. So the next time you're here, ask if you can see the photo. It's on the hall. It's hanging on the hallway outside the dining room. And you can see what that room looked like. It was set up, I think, for like 78 people or something like that. So that was probably the biggest thing. Little Denise, the French war orphan, when she grew up, she would have house parties here with her friends, but again, not big groups. They were relatively small. So they did entertain, but not in a huge scale.
I was curious because it just seemed like it's huge, first of
It
all.
is, yeah. They had a house in Florida, so they entertained down there from time to time. And they had a house on Cherry Island in Maryland where it was very casual. So again, it was, close friends and family is who they were entertaining.
That's nice though. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, going off of entertaining, I do want to circle it back. I'm sorry, I'm ping-ponging all over the place.
That's fine. There's a lot to talk
Christmas.
about.
Christmas. So could we talk a little bit about the process to kind of execute that transformation? Because I know you do close for several days. So how many hands are on deck? How much planning has to go into it in advance? What does that look like?
we need a lot of help. So it's really whoever wants to help can help decorate. Now, I will say there is a core group that are sort of informally the committee, the Christmas committee. There's probably about 6 people. They tend to be on the interpretation team, about 6 who really sort of take over certain areas. They might, be in charge of 3 or 4 rooms, maybe just 1 room. It just kind of depends on what their time is like. And they'll have an idea. They'll, want a color theme, or, maybe there is a theme to the room or a story that might be happening. There's the big crew of worker bees who they don't want to be in charge of a room. They don't want to have to come up with anything. They don't want to be the creative. They just want to come and help decorate a tree. The ground staff will come in and help, put on lights. We are decorating outside more and more than we used to. So they're keeping themselves busy. We don't have them as much as we used to have because they're doing their own thing outside. They're decorating Christmas trees all over the estate. So it tends to mostly be the interpretive staff who does the decorating in the mansion. Sometimes the guest services staff will come over and help as well. But we really don't start thinking hard about it usually until like June or July is when we really start doing things. In preparation for the holidays, we do close for 2 weeks. First 2 weeks of November is when I first came here, it was 1 week. It was very intensive. But again, the grounds crew, they weren't really decorating outside very much. They were inside. So there was more help, but it was a pretty intense week.
Understanding it is up and people can come visit now, what can folks expect when they come out this time of the year?
So you can expect, first of all, we're going to be open late on Saturday nights. So coming here during the day is a completely different experience than if you come in the evening, as you can imagine. We're open until 8 o'clock the next 4 Saturdays. Saturday nights, we will have food trucks. We'll have hot chocolate, both for adults and for kids. We'll have music. We'll have fire pits. So we're trying to really make it as festive as we possibly can. We'll have live music in the mansion on weekends, different times of the day. We do have our beautiful music room with our beautiful Steinway piano, which we do use. And I will tell you that if you've not been in this house with live music, it's amazing because it just adds to that element of warmth in a home when you hear live music just wafting through this house. The rooms are all very different. Again, they're not typically over the top, but they're all festive in different ways. 3 floors of decoration. There's lots to see. And something I will say in general, there's something for everyone here. This is going to sound terrible, but it's usually the men who are dragged here by women. And they usually come in reluctantly and they're like, yeah, it's a house, a mansion, but there are things that the men really like here too, because you've got the basement, the bowling alley, we have mechanical rooms, we have the garage with the cars. Now, that's not to say the women don't like these things too, but it's not just a pretty house. So there is something for everyone here. You're going to find something you like. You're going to find a room that you love and maybe even be inspired by some of the decoration, we hope. People come in and say, oh my gosh, I've never thought of that before. I'm going to go home and do that to my tree, or I'm going to put that on my mantle. So that makes me feel good, that they are truly enjoying it and taking something with them other than, just the cozy feel. So.
Oh, that's so fun. And again, it just goes back to the approachability of it all, that folks could see their own home, even though most of us do not have estates of this size or estates at all. It is wonderful that they can go in and see their own life reflected in a lifestyle that they do not necessarily have, which is really wonderful. So that's really fun. Now, I did also want to ask, behind the ropes.
To backtrack a little bit, before COVID, we used to try to do some guided tours during the day, even though we are primarily self-guided. But something I really wanted to do was introducing a tour called Behind the Ropes. Even if you come to see the house you visit, there are areas you can't go into. And there's usually a rope or a door is closed. And people are always asking, what's there? Why can't I go up there? So this is me literally taking you into those areas that are not open to the public.
Oh, how fun.
They're not necessarily pretty areas. They are, areas that sometimes areas that I would literally had just cleaned out because I've moved all these objects from this house over into our storage building. Sometimes it's the one and only tunnel. Everyone's always asking about secret tunnels. There are no secret tunnels in this house. If If there are, they're very secret because I don't know anything about them. There's one tunnel. I take you into the old wine cellar, I take you into the new wine cellar. We'd go up to the third floor, which were additional bedrooms and guest rooms. If you want to open up a closet door, I'll open up that closet door. So I'm taking you behind the ropes. It's by reservation only. It's very limited because we're going into some small spaces. So we do have to restrict the number of people who can come. So I did it once, it sold out immediately. So we did another one. And so we are going to be doing those much more regularly starting next season. It's probably going to be once a month and it'll be posted on our website. Keep a lookout for that if that's something you're interested in.
I will make sure in the show notes to share links to social media pages because that sounds like a really, and I know just having followed them myself, there's lots of helpful updates and information there for people to follow along. We'll get the website up in the show notes as well. And I would definitely encourage folks to get out to Nemours to see all of the holiday splendor.
Closed December 29th. So that is the last day for the
29th.
season.
Okay.
So just keep that in mind.
Well, yeah, this has been super fun. I hope that it was very informative I know I learned things and I've even been there. So I hope folks took some things away. But thank you so much, Paula, for taking the time to chat today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.